Loading, and we should be live in 3, 2, 2.5. Counting better at this. 1. Loading. It's fun. And we should be live. We are officially live, y'all. Tuning in on Zoom.
Jungle where I be these days. You swing my vine when you feel need to leave LA. Shawty call me sticky dick. I call her kissing kid. Oh, I'm the bad guy. Oh, I'm the animal. Hardly ever listening.
Ooh, I'll put this in the chat too. This is a playlist on Spotify called Butter, and the song right now is called Stickin'. I've also learned to, like at any point during the conversation, I don't think we need to mute each other because I know it just creates this genuine, like, we don't want to hear each other's laughs, giggles, so, yeah, just throwing that out there.
The live stream link on the Project Home website takes me to a Google document.
Yeah, so I just sent it to Larkin and Maya, who's going to upload our website and do their tech thing. And I'm going to put
I watched the first half of the screening last night, and all the stuff around the films we've seen is really, really, really lovely.
I watched it with my friend last night, and it was just so interesting to hear his reaction, because for us, we know what it's like, but to see authentic, genuine reactions, I'm like, yeah, we did it.
It was really odd to watch them again without the criteria in mind, and I was just kind of sat like, oh, have I made the correct choices? I did, given the criteria, but without that, and just which ones make me feel things, and that being the end of it all, with just completely different thought processes.
Trust your gut.
Another round on a different day, and like, you know, and actually the order of them, being able to kind of emotional journey. Yeah, just again, it was a long life.
Oh, how do I still hear music even though you've muted? Oh, because of the sound. Got you. I am such a granny.
Zoom can be a wizard sometimes.
I just bought a ring light, guys. Like, I'm very...
Oh, which one? Because Lord knows I need that for classes eventually.
Yeah, I tried to not do it, but a year after the fact, like, you should probably get a ring light, lady.
I read eventually. Leanne Lahava today.
What time are we officially starting?
It is 11:03. I'd say let's wait about 2 more minutes. I'm very like, I have to start at a 5 or 10, but let's come in. There's about 37 people tuning in. They are hopping around, and I asked, where's everyone tuning in from in the chat? I want to say it here too. Where's everyone tuning in from? I see
London,
LA,
Brooklyn.
Vancouver. If like our moderator and judges want to shout out real quick where they're coming in from.
Brooklyn.
London.
Vancouver, BC.
Oh. And I'm in LA, and I'm also seeing Berlin.
Oh,
Seeing Edmonton. Cool. Y'all, we're getting people tuning in from everywhere. Thank you so much for being here. We'll start in about a minute. Oh, now that I'm naming places, everyone's like, Poland, Costa Rica, Switzerland,
wow. Oh my
Austria,
God.
Netherlands, Greece. Welcome, welcome.
Grab a little more water and then I'll.
Yeah, everyone, let's grab our waters. Whatever.
I drank my tea way too quickly.
That wasn't even my coffee too. I was like, I needed to stick to my water, but pace myself.
Let me change my name to Ali so as not to confuse teams. Does that work? Probably not. Well,
Seeing some more places. Oakland, what's good? UK, Russia, LA, Barcelona, Copenhagen.
I'll show you
Wow.
later.
Toronto. All right. It is 11:05. How are we feeling, y'all?
Feeling good.
Yes.
Great. Sweet. So I'm going to kick us off, do some housekeeping things, and for especially if you're watching, to remind you some cool stuff we got going on today and with our panel. So what's up, everyone? My name is Jaslyn Eugenio Pastor, and I'm a team member of Project Home. Some things about Project Home, if this is your first time tuning in with us, we were established in 2010 and consists of artists that create work rooted in intention, founded in collaboration, colored in human emotion, and driven by passion. Through this mission, we are excited to present our first online movement festival, HOMESCREEN!
Yeah.
And we want to mention that this festival welcomes all identities, languages, and movement backgrounds. And we hope that this weekend has provided you a space to connect, to meet new people and artists, and most importantly, engage and grow through collaboration and conversation. And to kick off, before we kick off our panel, moving forward, Dance on Screen, a friendly reminder that after this conversation, we will be releasing the second half of our screenings at 12:30 p.m. PST. And please, 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 if you are able, donate to Hip Hop for Hope. They are fundraising for their Refugee Youth Empowerment fundraiser, and Project Home will be matching the first $500. So please, I'm going to put it in the chat. If you are able to, either spread the word or donate. Boom, there you go. And I've been seeing the results. Y'all have been popping at voting for your Audience Choice Award. So please keep going with that too in the chat. And then if you need anything, or if you're like, where's all this information? In the chat right there. projecthome.art/homescreen. Alrighty, everyone. So I'm about to pass it on to your moderator for today, Erin Daniel, and I want to tell you all a little bit about her. Erin is a movement artist, model, and creative storyteller. She is also the founder of Allies Doing Work, which is a community-driven space for intersectionality, radical accountability, and active allyship. Originally, from Baltimore, Maryland, Erin began dancing at 3. She is classically trained in both ballet and modern dance. She moved to New York in 2014 to begin her undergrad at Columbia University to create a unique course of study dedicated to human rights and race and ethnic studies to supplement and enhance her creative process as a dancer and multidisciplinary storyteller. And since graduating in 2018, let's go, Erin is in the process of creating an independent dance film, maybe send it to HOMESCREEN next time, when it releases in 2021. Her work currently focuses on the intersections between the arts, media, dance, popular culture, and social justice movements. Can we get some love in the chat? Throw some ones, throw some hearts for Erin.
Thank you.
Round of applause. The stage is yours. Here's the mic, Erin.
All right. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Moving Forward, Dance on Screen. As Jaslyn mentioned, I'm Erin Danielle, movement artist and creative storyteller. I'm so excited to get into this panel, which will discuss how the dance industry and dance world can utilize film to adapt to an ever-changing world and be a competitive force within the digital landscape. So we're going to begin by introing our three judges, Tali Fergus, Jillian Myers, and Marley Hansen. So to start with Tali, Tali is a movement artist with over 15 years of experience in the commercial world as both a dancer and choreographer with the UK's most successful hip hop theater companies, and as a teacher, artist, and mentor in her own right. Tali has orchestrated choreography classes across Europe, the US, and Asia. She's the founder and lead facilitator of Identity, Ideas, and Industry, a program designed to encourage dance artists' curiosity about their creativity and the industry at large through movement, conversation, and readings. Next up, we have Marley Henson. Marley is a programmer at Nowness. So she is responsible for acquiring and curating the best in short form content from around the globe. Her projects include programming screenings during New York Fashion Week, Photo London, and Sheffield Doc Fest. So Marley has also been a jury member at various film festivals. Her current work in the online space stems from a background in film production and from her master's in international film business. From producing short films during her studies to coordinating international film shoots, Marley has a well-rounded knowledge of the filmmaking process from conception and development through to distribution. And then last but not least, we have Jillian Myers. Jillian is a Los Angeles-based dancer and choreographer. She works at the nexus of commercial, stage, film, and site-specific performance. From choreographing Hosier's work song to multiple tours with Janet Jackson, Jillian was also an assistant choreographer for the film La La Land. She most recently wrapped her first season on the NBC show Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist as a choreographer. She wears many hats, makes many faces, and both reconciles and indulges in all her creative process has to offer. So these are our three panelists. Thank you all for taking the time out of your days, your nights. I'm not quite sure where everyone, kind of falls on the time scale. But thank you for making time so we can have this conversation about dance and film and where we hope to go within the next year or so. So just to start, just to kind of give everyone an update on where you are all now, I would love to hear shortly from you all kind of how your personal career has changed throughout the last year, throughout the last 9-10 months. I would love to just kind of start with a check-in. So we can start with Marley, and then Tali, and then Jillian.
Well, I guess for me over the last year, I'm super lucky to already be working in the digital space. So, for me, it probably hasn't changed as much as it has for others, other than the fact that, there's a lot more competition at the moment, a lot more films being submitted to us, which is absolutely fantastic. People have had some time to finish their projects that might have been kind of sitting in the back for a little while, which is fantastic. I think, one of the biggest challenges for us is working collaboratively with the team. It's something that everyone does, especially within the arts, and, moving that onto Zoom is it's always tricky, but we're doing it. It's happening. There's been some amazing films that have been sent to us over the last year, films that have been made at home, so it's all good.
Awesome. Thank you.
I firstly stopped dancing entirely, and then was shocked that didn't feel bad. And I realized how much of the dancing that I had been doing in the years running up to last year had been to maintain and for professional reasons. And there was almost a part of my brain that had told me the story that it wasn't. It was all kind of hobby based. So I enjoyed not dancing for a while because I didn't have to, which was lovely. And since then, I have managed a dance agency since 2011, and I've always thought of it as a sideline. It has been largely, but this year it became my main job really, and the thing that gave me a routine and a sense of purpose. And for that to be offering job opportunities to dancers in a time like last year also served me very well. And it also gave me time to put the wheels in motion for some longer term projects that I'd thought about, but just hadn't had the space given the general freelance hustle to put any work into. So yeah, those things are happening, which is great.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, so we are currently in Vancouver and very thankfully working on season 2 of the show that I worked on the year prior. And yeah, just it is like such a wild thing to be working in this time and trying to work like as similarly, you know, in the sense of like a functioning set or like being on set and how that works in the time of COVID. And that is its own kind of wild frontier, you know, and so riding the wave of that, but still just like, again, so thankful to be able to work in dance right now, because I think for, yeah, so many artists that is not happening. So, and other than that, yeah, there was a long pause before this, you know, came up, being at home and same Tally, like not dancing a whole lot. And you know, I really enjoyed it. A couple of classes, but just kind of, yeah, had a moment to really literally and figuratively pause and just consider. So, but yeah, I think that's where I am. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Also, excuse the noise. We have some sirens happening, so just gonna let those.
Yes.
Very 2021. Very 2021.
Yes, just chaos constantly. But I wanted to get into our first question. So just to kind of start things off, what are you all most excited about as dance in this moment transitions to being film first? And that can be through either classes or when people are creating new works, the entire process of dance being this film first process now. What is the most exciting about that? And on the flip side, what worries you too? What, you know, may or may not be lost in the process of restricting movement to film only? Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of the pros and cons of just this natural shift.
You touched on an interesting point about with classes as well, because I hadn't thought about that when I read the question. And I thought, what are my thoughts about this? But given the class context, it's really special to be able to train with people that you normally have to cross an ocean. Like I make an annual pilgrimage to LA and have done since like 2009. This is probably last year was probably the first year since I started doing that I haven't. And it is a real gift to still be able to access that training and that connection, because some of my senseis are over there, you know, so to not be able to have that. And also I think that it's opened up the possibilities for how we learn. There's lots of lectures that you can access on. I mean, there always have been, but not necessarily from the same people that you were taking choreography classes from. Right. And that has been a real treat to sit for 45 minutes and listen to Sean talk about finding, you know, his way as an individual mover, or to have Keone Madrid talking you through directing dance. Like that's a really that feels like a real privilege and really special, even though it's for everyone. I just they're like, this is just for me. So those are nothing but pros there for me in that way.
Thank you. And then I guess to expand it further, like what can be gained or lost when we're talking about, you know, dance being film first when it comes to choreography or, you know, creating pieces specifically to be showcased on film, and that can be on Instagram, YouTube, any other platform. So I'd love to hear from Marley and Jillian about your kind of thoughts on the pros and cons, or just, you know, things that you've seen.
Yes, for me, in terms of the, sorry, Jillian, in terms of the lots of stuff coming, you know, film first, we're getting, more access to people that we wouldn't necessarily have had films by previously. You know, people are making stuff made for platforms like Nowness, or, you know, for the wider kind of world that's, you know, not restricted to who can afford to ticket to go and see a performance, you know, something like that. And also, I think people experimenting more with things like, you know, you can record yourself and see what it looks like and do all of this stuff, and something looks great, use it later down the line, just bank it and, you know, keep it. That's amazing. And I think on the other side, I mean, you know, I'm not a dancer or a choreographer, but I know, having been to see dance pieces, you know, there's an atmosphere, you're missing out on a whole lot of things. And I guess, you know, like immersive performance and stuff like that, you know, you're going to miss out on all of that. I mean, Tally probably know Ivan Michael Blackstock, who's, you know, London based and is amazing. And I went to see this piece called Trap Lord that he did probably about a year and a half ago now, and he used film in that. It was in a warehouse space, stuff moved around, you were kind of in the film. Like, were you there? I mean, it was amazing, and that can't really be recreated as is, you know, and maybe that's not bad. There's like good things that can come from that if you try and translate it, but I mean, it isn't the same.
Right.
Oh man, so many thoughts. Okay, wrangle them, Jillian. So I think in general, like, because of now, it actually will, I am in the best version, I think, really give people an opportunity to consider how those two things are very different, and how you would approach those two scenarios, like live in all of its forms or being filmed, as different processes choreographically, right? So if anything, maybe strengthening that kind of recognition that not everything that looks good on a stage is going to look good filmed, and why, you know? And so as a maker, you, in this time, even just like what Marley said, like being able to play to like see what it looks different when I have film my combination just flat from the front, very, very wide. If I walk the camera in 10 feet, what does that feel like? If I put it on the angle, why does that part look different or better in my taste, you know, or, you know, as you're developing your taste as an artist and a maker, that's like, you know, I'm hoping that for that, that's like, for me, like, I think the best version of this time is like, you know, because it is, for me, I really consider them very different things. Like how I would choreograph a film is very different, or something to be filmed is very different than I would approach choreographing for a proscenium stage or an immersive space or an intimate space or a large space. They're all, you know, those are all really different skill sets as makers. So, and I think also kind of what Marley said too, like, you know, some work has always been considered to only be made to be filmed. You know what I mean? So it's not that, like, some of it isn't being lost, because again, like, that some work is made just to be filmed. Not, it maybe doesn't feel like a concession, like, oh, now I have to film it now. It's like, no, that's what I wanted to do. But for me, like some of the dance companies that, just like Marley said, that I would only ever get to see live, the fact that they're, you know, approaching filming their work is so exciting, because yeah, again, it connects us, it gives accessibility to you know, people that maybe otherwise wouldn't get to see it. And I think that also crosses into, classes. Like, same, I've taken classes from people that I really admire their work and never have seen them teach, you know? So like, to be able to learn is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think in a kind of more general sense too, like if we're talking about maybe what's lost when you put a camera with something, like in a academic sense, I think like dimensionality, ultimately, you know, like the camera compresses movement. So, you know, again, and how you approach choreographing for film. So yeah, being able to sit in the corner of a theater and what it looks like from there is going to be different than even if you put the camera in the corner, you know? So how to like create something that it gets as close to, or, you know, evokes the feeling of live, or being close to it if you want, or not. I don't know. Bag of thoughts. There you go.
That made me think of Punch Drunk and their immersive work, and that you go and you see it however many times and have a completely different journey, or go and see the same show on a stage, but you might sit somewhere else. And I wonder how that translates to, I mean, you can watch a film or a video and notice different things, but you're only ever going to get that person's, that the perspective and angles that, you know, the maker wanted you to have. There's no kind of, only I saw that because I was there at that moment kind of it.
Yeah. And also with film, I mean, you know, you redo things until you get it perfect, right? And so you lose that kind of rawness of just watching something as it happens. And that kind of takes away sometimes as well. Or makes it better. I mean, it depends.
And I think it's a good challenge too for different dancers and movers and choreographers to figure out where your strengths lie too. Because in my experience, dancing live is very different than dancing on a set. And or if you're dancing and you're trying to do like film, like actual film, and you only get like, right, like that, like certain amount. So knowing kind of what's at stake, and when you know that there's moments where you can redo something over and over and over again, and then moments where it's like, it needs to kind of stick like right now in this moment. So I think those are also going to be interesting challenges for dancers and makers, choreographers, you know, regardless of what sector you fall into, to really challenge themselves and figure out, what am I naturally drawn to, and what can I work on, and what like, you know, makes the most sense to me, because I think people can thrive in different little pockets of dance. Awesome. And then just to kind of move on, because I think, you know, with the films that were submitted to HOMESCREEN, we learned the importance of narrative in dance film. So dance films that have an ongoing narrative throughout the entire piece, dance films that don't. So I'd love to hear from all of you the importance of narrative in dance film, and how does that change how we engage with a piece? I'm not sure who wants to start, but yeah.
Marley.
I can go. Yeah. I don't think that a dance film necessarily has to have a super clear narrative. I think that, you know, a lot of it comes from the heart, for sure. You know, it's definitely deeply personal as well a lot of the time. I do think that just being aware of people that are outside the dance world that might be watching these dance films going forward, you know, that when you're pitching these projects and things like that, that you obviously have you kind of talk through your process, I guess. But I don't think it takes away from the film by not having, you know, a really structured narrative. On the other hand, you know, having something that is super structured, that has a really great story, that, you know, it can make it a bit more accessible to someone that might not be, you know, dance focused, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think it goes either way. And I think, you know, with some of the films that we saw, you know, there's a category for narrative that we were looking into, and it meant that, you know, certain films popped in that section that might have, you know, not been our front runners in other areas. And that's really, really interesting to look at in terms of, you know, the focus on the narrative, and whether or not it's like necessary to be at the front of all of these films.
Right.
I think for me, narrative isn't important. I think it's something to be considered, and you have to choose whether you plan to have it there or not. Because if you choose for it to be there, but that doesn't resonate, then that feels like something's not been lost, or something's been lost or not taken advantage of. More important for me is it has to have an intention. Like, I don't really care what it is that you have to say, but I want you to be trying to say something, even if it's how cool is the sea behind me. You know, it doesn't have to be a grand statement or, you know, any great social message, but I just want to be able to see that you're trying to say something. And I think Marley made a great point about non-dancers and narrative helping translate to those people, because I often find that we as a community make work that our peers will like and inspire each other, which is valid. I'm just not sure that's always the intention, but it doesn't always reach out further, and narrative or lack thereof might be a reason for that.
Right. I guess it depends who you're making it for as well. You know, if you're making it for yourself, then, you know, you do whatever you need to do. But if you're wanting lots of eyes, you're wanting to use the film to bring new people into this space, then yeah, you might need to think about it a little bit more.
And yeah, I agree so much. I don't think, for me, narrative isn't essential. It, of course, I personally love kind of pieces that veer more in the narrative direction, just because I think dance is a language and all dancers, we know it. So how to best like employ that knowledge of dance being communication in a filmic aspect is a big challenge. It's big. And again, like that kind of subjectivity of like what feels very clear to you as a storyteller will inevitably be fuzzy to somebody else, right? Because that's just the crux of art. It is personal. So, and I think like for anyone that's out there that submitted films, like another really important piece of that kind of category of narrative was the kind of submitted statement about what your piece is and or what your thoughts. I'm not sure exactly how it was framed for when you submit, but that part was really important, especially for the pieces that were less of a kind of narrative for us as a viewer to maybe meet you in the sense of what we thought it was, and then what you set out to do, and then how that came across for each of us personally, and so I think that's like another thing, like a skill that like myself personally, like we can all work on is like the actual words to kind of set out or what we're trying to do. Because of course, like as dancers, we're used to our limbs being the words, and we're writing with like our body and our art, but how to also like be able to maybe put some words to that of like what your intention is or what you're setting out to do. It's also a skill to be practiced, I think. And I think like another goal for maybe young makers or young, like, that are approaching narrative dance films is also how can you like how can all bits of the movement help tell the story, as opposed to set up the story then dance, that those two things are not separate. Like how can we weave those together? And again, that's just like a personal goal, and something again I really love to watch is like when those two things feel as one, as opposed to like I've presented the story and the situation and then I dance, so.
Those were some of my favorite videos to watch, or the things that I'd noticed where there's a transition between locations and dance happened in those moments. I'm going from, the kitchen to the hallway, and I'm going to use the door to move, as opposed to, like you say, dance here, walk there, dance there, or the build up to the big dance break moment. All very valid choices, but in the arc of a story or narrative, it can really break away from, especially to a non-dancer. I mean, I can only watch things as one, but I would imagine if you're engaged in a story and then the story stops and the dance starts, you'd be like, oh, but where'd it go? And that also makes me think of music. And as someone who trained in choreography and very musical and using the lyrics, there's something to be considered in that with a narrative. Like, are the words that are being said, do you want them to align with the narrative that you're telling? Because I will listen to those words and try to tie them in with the message that you're trying to share. And that, I think that it is actually a really advanced skill to tell a story, your own story, physically and otherwise, through a very dense piece of music that is clearly an artist's own expression.
Right.
Went off on a tangent there, sorry.
No, that's all. I mean, because music, or maybe to not have music, right? Like if you want a silent dance film or just like a white noise kind of dance film, like those are choices, and they impact the way that you want your audience to engage with your film. So, and I think that music is something that we often forget, but can really change a piece and draws people in too. And then,
especially if it's super well known, that's a connection automatically, and so you have to, is the song going to take away from what you're actually trying to do?
And I think we kind of start, whether it's a song or the thing that might spark an idea or spark the movement, it's often thought that you need to take that source material with you the whole way to the end, but it might be the reason you make those eight counts of movement, but it doesn't need to end up in the film. So yeah, just thought.
And then kind of to jump off that, and you guys can use your reflections from the dance film, all the dance films that you've watched throughout this whole process of home screen. What are some general notes that you would give to the audience or anyone who submitted or wants to submit, maybe next time? Things that you've seen in dance film that work very well, that make it very engaging, compelling. It would be great to hear the dancer side and non-dancer side, because I think both of those are valid and we need to be constantly like trying to balance them both. So would love to hear just some overall, these choices kind of stood out to me or really worked for me or really drew me in. So would love to kind of spend some time talking about that.
Do you want me to go? I'll go non-dancer first. So I think some of the things that really work well is when you use the camera as part of the movement. I think that's also something that's really important when thinking of a project that might have been, at its concept made for stage possibly, and then obviously because of this year you're trying to translate it into film, which is fantastic, but it doesn't work just pointing and shooting a lot of the time, and you use that absolutely, as and when it's needed, but I think the camera can be choreographed as well, and I think that that's really interesting to kind of play with, and I also think use of location is really interesting with some of the films that we saw. I mean, there were some really cool locations, and especially the pieces that were made from home. I mean, you can use stairs, you can use doorways to frame things, play around with it. Just because you don't have access to, an amazing studio space or, a beautiful old building or something, I mean, it doesn't matter. You've got great spaces to use angles and things like that, which is awesome. I think also not getting too attached to some footage is probably an important thing to note. Just because you've made it doesn't mean it has to make the final cut, and that's a really hard thing to do. We're all attached to the work that we make, and also just making sure that music syncs up and things are all kind of on beat is just something to kind of bear in mind. But everything was so beautiful that we watched. It was a joy to watch everything.
Might be noisy, I'm sorry. I enjoyed similarly to using dance in not just the dance moments, I enjoyed the site specific stuff that used the space, and it was beautiful to see things, whether it was at home or in more in locations outside, but to actually make use of the materials, or whether it was a wall or a couch, that stuff was really, really nice to see. And I especially enjoyed, we've mentioned it a few times now, I think, but where the dance felt 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, it didn't feel flat. I think that recording choreography I do it all the time, and it serves its purpose, but when you move into narrative-led film, it helps us have those moments that we're missing because we can't be in person, and just to see the curve of a limb, or the close-up of like a neck, and it not feel that because of the way the movement's been made, that as a camera rotates, it suddenly goes very flat and then becomes full again when you get to my back. Yeah, so those moments were, I'd just write on my notes, I'd be like, made me feel things. That was like my and it was things like that where I felt closer to the action that really worked for me.
Oh man, I mean, so for me, what gets so exciting about dance on film is that it feels very infinite, the kind of ratio of elements, right? Like, is dance the bigger piece of the pie, and then location is less important and cameras, not as involved? Or is it mostly about the camera and it's very little movement, or yeah, is about the space and then the dance is a very small part of it. And all of those things are correct, which is super, super exciting, right? And I really loved that within this collection of films, we saw all of kind of examples of all of those, which is and they're all right, which is woo, which is it's just exciting. For me, what I think always kind of again, personal preference and choice, but the baseline of what communicates is when the camera perspective feels intentional and composed with like reason to support your story or idea or feeling, right? So just like what Marley said, even if the camera is stationary, it should be a very considered reason why it is stationary and why, as a viewer, that perspective is important for them to feel or receive. So it's like to separate the camera from the choreography is not, for me, is like that is not dance on film. As you're making and considering, should always be considered, even if it is stationary, and that only with that camera perspective, am I able to feel that very specific thing. So like if I'm very close, what is that offering, the audience, that specific experience, as opposed to being very wide, or if the camera's rotating with or opposing, like I didn't go to film school. There's lots of theories about all of these things, but thankfully, I think as dancers and choreographers, we practice in a lot of those things all the time, right? It's like where we want the eye to go and why, and hopefully what we want someone to feel and what we think the important parts of movement are going to help them feel that way, right? Yeah, I don't know. So some films, I think like it's fun because people can watch them. So it's like direct examples. Some films that I thought did this really well. Our Touch, I think this film was a duet, and it's just so beautifully made for intimacy, and how the camera really highlights what it is. I think the choreographer and the director, what they felt was really important, as opposed to needing to see the whole body to tell the story. I thought it was so beautiful. I am going to butcher this title, and I'm so sorry, but was it Tridesh? I don't know how to say. The maker was Ellen Wolf, but even in her kind of description, it was about the partnership of architecture and dance. So, how the film was made, really, they felt like equal partners. Like some of the time they were just walking up the stairs, but it gave me as a viewer an opportunity to be like, whoa, how beautiful are those stairs? How beautiful is this place? Where the heck are they? It is gorgeous, so, and it can be that too, which is so exciting. Anyhow, there's so many good ones. We could really like go down the list and talk about it, but yeah.
Awesome. So just going to switch gears a little bit to what happens maybe after the film, is made, is edited, it's all ready to kind of be put out there. And the reality is we live in a really content heavy world. There's like not just dance content, but just content, right? And everyone engages online and on platforms in slightly different methods. So Marley, specifically with your experience with Nowness, I'm sure you're getting flooded with content either sent to you, or things that you're just seeing on Instagram or Facebook or like, wherever. So when it comes to once, a film is maybe put out there on a YouTube channel or a personal Instagram, what helps from a content strategy standpoint when it comes to getting that film out there and making sure that, it's got eyes on it? I would love to know your thoughts just about how you wade through content and the things that, have really made you go, wow, like, that whole process of finding something that just really like sticks.
Yeah, totally. So I think super important when you're putting stuff out online is to remember how you operate online. And I guess, the kind of thing, you're watching something, you've got your phone out, your concentration, that kind of stuff. And so something that we find a lot is, you have X amount of time at the beginning of a piece to catch someone's attention, otherwise they're gone. Right. And I think it's like 3 seconds that someone gives something properly before they move on, which is crazy. So, when making a dance film and putting something online, it's lovely to do opening titles and all of these beautiful things, but actually, just get into it, kick it off. Not too much black at the start, I think, is really important. Just you want to keep people's eyes on the piece.
Right.
So kind of having that pay it forward moment at the beginning. If you do want to have titles, having something that kind of comes before that. I think it's also, you know, when considering where you want to put your content online, you need to think about that before you start kind of spamming it out, because I know personally we watch so much stuff, and a lot of it has been sent to us without it really being considered, you know, the platform that they're being sent to. And so, you know, you're probably not even going to get a response at that point, which is unfortunate. So I think, you know, doing your research, making sure you know who you're pitching things to, making sure you have all the music rights and all of that kind of stuff in place before you send it on. And if you don't, just being completely honest about that from the get-go, because that's something that definitely can affect a decision for us as well. I mean, you know, we're a global platform. We have to have stuff that's available, you know, all around the world. And, you know, you put something on YouTube and you don't have the rights, unfortunately, it's going to be muted. You know, they're super strict on that kind of thing. Facebook, we find it all the time. We put a film on Facebook, like a minute later, this has been muted. Ah, no. That kind of stuff. But I think, you know, the joys of the online space is that you follow people and like other institutions and places like that, and so being able to share other people's content and, you know, spread the word that way is amazing. I mean, I find so much stuff just through, you know, someone posting something beautiful and I've never seen that person before, and I'm going to take a dive into that world, and that's amazing. And festivals like this as well, you know, definitely get your stuff out there at the festivals. It's so lovely. And especially this year, you know, or this last year, everything's available digitally. You don't have to be physically there, which is wonderful. So I think, you know, doing that is great. But also looking at platforms, exclusivity rights, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, what platform needs what, and I think that's also a thing for festivals as well, although less and less people are requiring kind of the exclusive premiere and that kind of thing. But I know for Nowness, we like to premiere pieces. We like to have 15 days exclusivity, and then from 15 days, you know, you can put it out wherever you'd like. So just making sure, you know, if you have your heart set on a film being featured on Nowness or, you know, any other platform, but you've already released it on your YouTube, you know, unfortunately that's gonna, you know, so just doing your research and that kind of stuff when you're pushing things out. Yeah.
And also I think it's interesting, particularly with Instagram, which I feel like is the most active of the platforms when it comes to consuming short film content, or I'm sorry, short form content. So when you have like a long film, maybe something that's 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 minutes, figuring out maybe how you break that down on a platform like Instagram versus a platform or versus other sites where viewers like to sit and look at long form content. So I think that is also the importance too, because like with Nowness, sometimes it's only 10 seconds and then I'm hooked and I'm trying to find the longer video, and you know, that's like a whole process. So making choices about like what your 15-second preview is, or what that moment is, those moments that kind of go viral and spark, it's usually not a 3+ minute piece, because like, you know, that's just not really always how it works. So knowing how to kind of take moments from your longer form piece and then know how to accurately and smartly kind of share those too with different platforms that like, you know, for like, there kind of has to be a strategy of, you know, how you're taking a larger body of work and then choosing to either chop it up, you know, or if you want it to stay and it's in its long form too.
Yeah, and I mean, social media is amazing to promote all of this content, and I guess also deciding which parts you want to push forward on socials and which parts you want to save for the people that actually do sit and watch the full film, I think is really important too, because you don't want to sell yourself short. You don't want to, you know, it's like watching a film trailer. You've seen the whole film once you've seen some of those trailers, and you know, I want to be left, like you said, I want to watch that whole film. How do I get to it? Where can I find it? It's definitely, and I actually wanted to ask you, Tally and Gillian, about TikTok and your thoughts on the whole world of TikTok, because I think, you know, that's something that dance does incredibly well on, right? And like Nowness is definitely figuring out the TikTok world, and our dance films are what we're kind of leading that with. But I also know that, I mean, stuff can kind of go wild on TikTok, and I don't know how authentic that is to a lot of people's process.
I feel like it would actually suit my movement really well. I tend to not travel particularly far. There's lots of gesture, pedestrian type movement, but I feel ultra resistant to it. For the we spoke about it in our pre-panel, that my passion doesn't lie in editing. I don't want to sit, like, I'm happy to stand there and dance for an hour and just pop a little snippet up without even laying the music on, which may be to the detriment of my platform and the slickness of it, but that feels authentic to me. And once I start fiddling about and trying to time the music, I mean, it's completely valid. Every opinion that I share, the opposite end of the spectrum, is completely valid, because, you know, we're dealing in art here. But for me, it and it's just another thing to have to do. Even a reel on Instagram, which is pretty much TikTok. I went on it and was just like, what? No. So, and then there's a whole other thing as well. You know, there's people that aren't trained making up these kind of what were essentially like these for us back in the day. And they travel the world, which is lovely in one sense, but there's a certain possible undermining of the work that we do and the integrity of it, that something like that can spread like wildfire. It's complex.
That's so beautifully though, Tally, man. Oh yeah, I mean it's hard to say because I don't engage, so I don't actually really know what happens there. But I see little trickles of it in other spaces, and I mean the balance of it all, right? Like in the plus is people are dancing, people that would never otherwise dance. People, there's lots of eyeballs that are like, oh, dance is a normal thing, which, you know, that everyone can do, which is actually something like as a choreographer you encounter all the time with people that think, well, I can't dance. It's like, yeah, you can. Yes, you can. Dance is the best, and it comes in every form. So that is, I think, the ultimate plus, right? You know, of just like more people doing it. But just as Tally said, I think it can really undermine the craft of choreography. Like that is a craft and a skill that people work their whole lives on, you know, and it lasts longer than 15 seconds or 30 seconds. I have no idea what the time limit is. So I think in a way, yeah, it kind of can shortchange what that position is, you know, and what that means for people that, you know, really dive deep to uncover what that is for them, themselves in their own artistry. So yeah, it goes both parts, but in general, it kind of makes me sad. I'm like, oh man, but everyone dancing makes me happy. So there we go. I don't know.
If there's any channels, I mean, I don't plan to download the app to this. If there's a way for me to see good TikTok content that is against what the opinions that we've shared, I would genuinely love to see it, because I know it can be really cleverly used. Yes. And really creatively used. But I guess similarly to how I felt when Instagram started and you could only share 10 seconds, I was like, this, it felt really detrimental personally for me to the scope of my ideas, because if we were all going to be digesting things that were that short, I wouldn't bother thinking in form anymore. That's me, and that's the limits of my mind, and that's my problem to fix. But just naturally, you know, if we're all consuming this way, then I'll shrink my ideas to fit that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're kind of in the last section of our conversation, which is going to touch on a little bit, and this also leads into some of the questions we've gotten from the audience too. So hopefully we can segue nicely. Actually, before we move on, a member from the audience, David, he asked, what are some other platforms for dancers to share their work, maybe outside of Nowness, but other platforms that you all have seen. So I think that could be a great way to kind of maybe end this section. For me personally, I know I do a lot of YouTube, and I feel like my YouTube is just programmed to know me so well now that I just get served with things. I don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time trying to find stuff anymore. Maybe, you know, five years ago when I was in high school and stuff, I did have to peel back and find stuff. But now I think that the algorithms on all platforms are just constantly like, you know, just feeding us stuff that we've already seen. So, which can be good and bad, right? Because then there's obviously things that you're not seeing that don't fit within that algorithm. But
Good question. I mean, Marley said it, but like I actually personally have been watching a lot of other dance film festivals have gone online, and that's been such a treat. Like, and there's tons of dance film festivals all over the world. What's the site? Film Freeway? I don't know. If you just put in dance film festival, a huge list will come up. So that's, I think, one way. And also, as Marley had said, like a lot of different people, especially now, have their eyes on them, you know, not only dancers. So that might be a really great way to connect you to other kinds of makers by, you know, just them seeing what you make. There's another art website that I also personally love. It's called Boom, and it's many O's, and I don't know how many. It's like seven. It's like 7 O's.
Like 7 or 8. Yeah, Boom TV.
And you know they have all kinds of art on their site, you know, all kinds of makers, and I really love their curation. And I think kind of again just kind of circling back, like you know, if there's places that you like to look for things, like that's probably where you want to put your things, right? You know, so it's like more, you know, that's, if that's something you enjoy, I think it's important to honor that, which like I think another thought I really wanted to share as we were kind of going over your questions. I think more than making work for a specific platform, the first task is making work that you like, because man, that is the hardest, right? You know, and refining what you like and learning about your tastes, and then you keep practicing it, right? So I think if your ultimate goal is to make it for someone or something else, at some point the journey will feel tedious as opposed to joyous. So you know, yeah, as well as looking for places for it to live, but also, yeah, first and foremost, making things that you're like proud of and you yourself enjoy, because sometimes you can be your harshest critic. So yeah.
awesome. So just to kind of finish up, I wanted to discuss, you know, the issue of compensation and or funding, right? So, because that is going to look a little different for every single person. And, you know, if you're making work for a brand or for a company, you know, that's a whole different process than self-funding and just making work to make you happy and to put yourself out there. So, you know, with that being said, I would love to discuss kind of the issues of compensation and funding, because I think they've always been an issue for dance, even outside of film, you know, just always been a hurdle that dancers of varying levels have had to overcome. So how can we kind of set the precedent that, you know, as dance moves to being film first, how can we, as a dance world, as a dance, as people who care about dance, ensure that there are models of funding for dancers and choreographers to continue making films, so that we can continue to push things forward. So when we talk about issues of, you know, how people can keep creating, I feel like we kind of have to bring that part up. And Richard, a member of our audience, asked, you know, if a dancer has a budget, you know, for his project, you know, what should be top priority, right? So having to go through and make a list of what you can and can't do. So yeah, we'd just love to open up the topic of funding and compensation.
We're quite lucky in the UK. It might not feel immediately accessible to everyone, but the arts funding that we have at our disposal, in comparison, like when I've been in California and spoken to some of my dancing friends, they're like, you guys are so lucky that there are pots of money. We don't have access to pots of money. To the hip hop community, or any style that isn't classical or contemporary, it can feel a little far away.
Mm-hmm.
But the pots of money exist, and I myself, after 15, this is the first year that I've written any funding applications, because I've been really fiercely independent, and the further along that I got, the less I wanted to give ownership of any of the work that I'd done over to any funding organizations with funding. And as this year, I've just been like, no, if you've got pots, I freaking want one. So I advise anyone with national arts councils or contemporary houses who are open to all styles. Now that we have the time and we are at home, now would be the time to feel better about talking about your work, because that will trip us up more so than anything. We're used to like showing it, like I'll show you how good I am, but you're going to need to write however many pages about that to have access to the money. But okay. But yes, in specifically speaking about the UK, we are very, very lucky to have access to funding. I could say, but we are clearly running out of time. I'm sorry.
No, please.
I know that, you know, for a few of the films that we've shown, you know, one in particular that comes to mind is a piece called Sink or Swim, which deals with mental health. And they managed to get some funding from Mind charity. And so I think, you know, just kind of tapping into some of the themes that your piece might have and just exploring the different avenues that way. And also looking at the films that you really admire and seeing maybe where they got some of their funding from and reaching out and asking as well. And also don't be afraid if you know, you don't end up getting some funding, ask for some feedback. I mean, people are busy and it is tricky, but I mean, ask and, you know, people will help.
And I also think, Marley, from, you know, your vantage point in the content space, I'm curious to see how just broad content houses like Nowness or Instagram or Facebook or like, you know, just any platform or space that kind of champions content and champions people being able to create content. I'm interested to see how they, you know, might step up and offer grants. You know, we're going to fund 20 dancers to create 20 pieces of work and we're going to help. So that's things I've been seeing, you know, on a small level, on like a grassroots type of level. But I really think that content houses have an opportunity because they also run off of content. So they need people to be making content, and we need to make sure that like creators can make. So it's kind of going to have to be this like, you know, this partnership between platforms that are always, you know, hoping for new content, expecting new content, and creators to kind of be honest about the state of the content creation world, and spaces that have access to extra funds, and that can be like, you know, a company or something national in the case of London, thinking ahead too, and being like, we need to pour into the dance world or to the creator world so that people can keep creating, so that we can also keep putting stuff out there. So it's that's what I'm hoping will happen. That's what I think makes the most sense for both parties to be able to kind of fuel each other. So those are things I've seen on a small scale. And then I'm hoping that they can continue to grow and that there's more funds that are going to be accessed by more dancers. And then Jillian, did you kind of have any thoughts? And I was thinking specifically with you, since you've, you know, been on sets and maybe worked with other dancers, where the issue of compensation comes in too, because if there's funding and then you're working with other people, there's always that issue of, you know, making sure everyone is compensated, or if that's not the case, like, you know, how you can kind of navigate that too.
Okay, there's a couple thoughts I want to also to jump back. So, and answer that. Yeah, even in the proposition of, or the proposal of this question, I Googled, I was like, dance film grant? Like, because I have no idea. Every project that I've ever made, I've funded myself, you know, which like, you know, it just is the reality. But again, like there's got to be, more out there. As far as I saw a question pop up in the chat about other film festivals. I think somebody was curious. Again, I think Film Freeway, if you put in dance film, a whole list will come up of where you can submit to them. But I also think some of those festivals are starting to like offer that making like a grant. So like one that I know that does that is San Francisco Dance Film Festival, and they've just recently started doing it where they will basically pick one maker to, they will like fund their project to I think a certain degree, you know. So I think some festivals are starting to do that, and yeah, but and then I think somebody else's question too about like what about the kind of priority and means like. From this festival alone, like even the home projects, I was so impressed by, you know, so really it just made me even more inspired that like, as somebody that kind of is very thankful to work in a very big scale, you know, like big crew, big fancy movies. So sometimes I think, oh, that's the only way you can make really cool things. Not true at all. You can make some really cool things with your phone in your bedroom. It just depends on your idea, right? And how you frame it. So I just want to encourage everyone else and myself, like you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles to make something that people feel something from, right? So and then I think in the priority of that, like when you're making, is just like again an idea or an impulse that you are excited about, because if you're excited about, you're gonna, you know, get in there and dig around to, you know, make it. So anyways, as far as like dancers, dance payment, again, it all really depends on scale. So if you're working on a very small budgeted project, then, you know, just I always, I guess, again, and maybe in the way that I work, but as a choreographer, somebody that maybe or wrangles that, like I feel always it's my responsibility to make sure that the people I'm bringing into my project are paid and that they are paid accordingly. So and again, that depends on how much money there is even to start with, right? So but that's something that I really, it's important. And then I would say on the bigger scale of like on a show, you know, or like on a again, I think that kind of communication between the choreographer and production to make sure that the production, who usually people that don't know anything about dance or, you know, the standards of dance, that you make sure that you are their advocate for telling them like, actually, no, this is actually the standard that dancers usually go by. And this is why, because these people have trained for 20 plus years and have paid for lessons their whole life. So you can afford it, and if you can't, then I won't bring them, you know. So it, you know, it's kind of I've always felt that, yeah, as a choreographer, you are a big advocate for also just educating people that don't know about dance about what it takes, because I think, I mean, as always, people want as much for as little, right? Because they want to make the grandest thing, but also knowing that it is worth paying artists because they bring something of great value. So it is, yeah.
And I think it's great that you share that that many of your projects have been self-funded, because I think that's important for people to hear, because what someone might see on your Instagram, but they might not know. And when talking about compensation and funding, those are always kind of like, you know, tough topics or topics that people tend to shy away from. So I think it's helpful, that honesty, that's like, hey, this was a self-funded project, or this was a grant that I got through this blah, 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 or this is part of my grad school thesis. Like, you know, all those things are crucial so that people aren't comparing themselves to a standard that like they might not need to, right?
Yeah.
So
well, and I think also what Marley said, it's really interesting when you watch dance films and you go through those credits, how many people worked on that? How, you know, and at the end of it, if there's like some of the ones that I really love, it's like, oh, there's like a television studio behind this, or some like a big organization that gave funding. They have support, you know, and not all of them do, but I think, yeah, that's a really good kind of like trail to uncover of like, this is a thing I really love. These are people that help make them that possible. Maybe I can work with them or learn from them about how I can make something too.
Yeah.
And even if you just need, you know, a little bit of a top up at the end of a project for a grade, or, you know, a sound mix or something, I mean, don't be scared to reach out and say, hey, this is unfinished and I need your help. And, you know, at that point, you're not asking for a full piece to be funded. There's, you know, it's a smaller amount. There's likelihood that there might be a pocket of money somewhere that people can, you know, access and help you out with.
Or if they can't, they know somebody that's like just getting started and would do it for free.
And would do it for free. Totally. Exactly.
So it's all, I mean, I think every film is a collaboration of many different moving pieces. So, and just like asking for help, asking, do you know somebody that does this? You know, like, I don't know.
And if your strength isn't writing a pitch for funding, get someone on board who's done it before. You know, just work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, the worst anyone can say is no, you know, but they can't say
And then you
no.
say why.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make a point about self-funding pieces, because especially in London at the moment, there's quite a big trend for spending a good, you know, £150–200 on filming your choreography. And that whether it's the end goal or it is just where it ends up, the kind of finish line for it is Instagram a lot of the time. And I think unless you have infinite cash flow to put into these projects, it's, if you're going to invest financially into them, then make that piece work for you, you know, like take the time to, you know, push it to the different platforms or write about it in a way that's engaging and can get it seen somewhere else. And it's not a case, like the thought that came into my head was about dreaming bigger, but it's not. It's more practical than that. It's, you know, I could have just propped up my phone and filmed it here and put that on Instagram. So if I'm going to take it up in scale and in time and money, then I should probably do that the whole way across the board and give the piece a bit of a chance. And then just on what Gillian was saying about ideas for as a priority, it's just a thing that I live by, that I just try and pop into every time I get an opportunity to speak. That is, that I don't believe we own ideas unless we do something with them. So that will always be the most important part of my work, is that I've made the effort to take it out of my brain and put it into the world, even if it is an unfinished version. Unless I state that, no one's ever going to know that. And especially now, I always feel so grateful that I'm feeling creative at all, that it feels more urgent to me to get it out in whatever form, because it might just, as quickly as it came to me, it may just go.
Yeah. So. All right, we're on to our last question to kind of end us out on, you know, a large scale kind of mindset. So thinking about dance, thinking about film, I think that bond between these two art forms is going to be really special, because I think they just have the ability to impact many people, both in the dance world and outside of dance world. So I would love to just, you know, kind of broadly talk about how dance film is a method of storytelling, specifically to address, you know, the issues that might be plaguing you, your family, your small sector of the world, your entire country. How can we use dance to storytell, to talk about, you know, the good things that are happening as well as the really tough things? And I think dance and film can kind of do that in ways that other things can't.
I'm like, Tal, you look like you got a good one.
I was typing at the same time in the notes. But the main thing for me that I definitely needed to remind myself of, as it got most intense here last year, was that it's not my job to talk about every social issue under the sun. It's not my job, and it's not my area of expertise. So my priority is, which do I know most about? Which is closest to home for me? What do I have? Do I have anything to say about it? Because sometimes you don't have anything to say. And it's really easy with the issues of the moment, or when there is an issue there's always an issue with the moment. But, you know, when you're seeing lots of stories come out about it, to feel that you should have one too. And sometimes you do just need to be quiet and wallow in the mess of it, or wait for the creativity amongst the mess to come through, which is the very opposite of the question that you've asked. But it's just a reminder that you may not have something to say, especially in the grit of the shit.
Right. And it's never too late either. Like, you can also talk about something that impacted you a year prior, or
Yes.
five years prior. So it's never too late. Like, you don't have to worry about missing your moment.
But a poet from here called Caleb Femi, he, in the thick of the George Floyd protests and the relative fallout for us here. He just spoke about joy and imagination being like a superpower, and I kind of took it upon myself to almost not talk about the issues, but just that there is validity in not talking about the issues, and that is also a form of that's my version of what's happening, is that then becomes my job and my form of protest to have a good day. And that is still a comment on what's happening without it being a literal comment on what's happening, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I guess you have the decision, you know, when you're making pieces, you know, you do it for yourself. It's a healing process. And if that ends up being something that you want to share, that's fantastic. And hopefully, you know, other people will be able to understand, you know, through your work. But, you know, on the other side, you know, you could also make a documentary dance hybrid and, you know, really, you know, get in on the facts. And that's amazing as well. And those types of films can be used, you know, on certain platforms to widen the message and get it out further, which is amazing. And I think the use of dance, while it is so raw and personal and emotional at times, can be really useful for those projects.
Right.
Yeah, the word that just keeps coming to mind is collaboration. I think, you know, and I also think what you just said, Tally, is so important too, of, you know, maybe a topic that is like very important or is a big thought, like taking the time to work through that, you know. I think sometimes, like, because there's so much coming at us all the time, maybe the instinct is to immediately make and react and do, you know, but, you know, those big thoughts maybe require some big time to consider how to represent them, you know, personally. So I would say, don't be afraid to take your time with like really kind of processing, and then working with others like that can offer you a perspective on what you're feeling that maybe you wouldn't already, or you wouldn't have the opportunity to experience. So I think the more voices and experiences you have in the room when you're making, the better a project can be. So just like really collaborating and including and listening. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We're going to move into just the last section, which is just answering a few questions that we might have from the audience. We actually touched on a bunch of them throughout the conversation, but we just received one from Maya. And Maya asks, do you have an example of something you created, film or some other medium, or someone you know created under the conditions of the pandemic that surprised, challenged, or excited you? So is there any work that was kind of born out of the COVID era that made you go, wow, or challenged you?
I watched a lot of pieces that came through that were made during COVID, and a lot of dance pieces. It seemed like, you know, that was what people were doing to kind of get through. Obviously you're home and, you know, you've got time, and that's amazing. Personally, I actually had to take a break. I had to speak to my boss and just say, look, I need someone else to take on these for a little while, because it was quite overwhelming in an amazing way, because it was the fact that we are all in this exactly together, all around the world, getting these films from everywhere. And it was amazing, but it, you know, it's pretty overwhelming. And I think just the pure emotion and passion that people were putting into these pieces was mind-blowing. Like, I haven't seen a collective group of work like that. You know, it was amazing.
You need more thinking time?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, Tal. Do you know something?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be able to hold my intensive identity ideas industry this year at half capacity. There were 16 of us in a huge white room, and it felt like it was our halfway house between dancing at home and going back into studios, because they were open at the time. And we had 5 days together. And on the 5th day, we made a little something, and it will be in the screening this evening, I think. And it's the first, it's freestyles, but it's to a really powerful song called Kwame Nkrumah, and I listened to it and freestyled to it a lot through June, which was when all the BLM protests were happening, and I played it in a one of the sessions earlier in the week, and it was just like, oh, okay, so that's the song. And just to watch it back, and each dancer only moves for 2 counts of 8, but I can just see their week in those 8 counts, and that coupled with the song and just what we'd all been through, and to be able to share that with the world and be proud of it as a standalone piece of work in a year where I think I've made maybe 3 things versus something every other week, is, yeah, I'll look back on that in years to come and be really, really proud of it and all of the people in it.
Good. I am I see all these things like flashing in front of my mind. I'm just like, the fact that anything was made last year, I think, is a huge achievement. You know, like I think at the top of the conversation, like I didn't do it much at all. So like just watching work that, yeah, as a response or just like emotional pieces, I am so impressed by. I also, I think, and again, like even this is happening right now and was started last year, that giving like the impulse as a reaction to what's happening is like, okay, let's make a place where people can share what they're feeling, and I think that's huge. And so good job, Project Home. Very nice. Yeah, that's kind of maybe a lame answer, but the year was big and full. So
Yes.
Going through and having any sort of impulse to make, and you did that, good job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just freeing ourselves from quantity.
Yes.
Just that whole process of having to make everything all the time for the entire year, freeing ourselves from quantity.
Yeah.
So thank you all for your time. Thank you for everyone who is tuning in. I feel so full from this conversation. I'm so glad we got to talk about dance and film, and hopefully people feel a bit more prepared or open-minded towards embarking on dance and film in this upcoming year or 2 years even. I think dance and film is going to be around for quite some time. And yeah, I just am really happy that you all, offered up your mindsets and your knowledge, and it was just such a fruitful conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for leading us in that, Erin, and also providing a framework to talk about these things. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So like we did before the YouTube, I would love to just do a collective breath for our panel. And if you're watching, breathe with us. We'll do 3. Let's try for 3. A deep breath in. Two more in. And last one. Inhale with all of the knowledge that was shared in this space, and exhale all the good opportunities that are going to come for this year. I just want to say, my goodness, wow, I was so immersed in hearing the conversation, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time. I know this year there's so many things that are happening, and it's been turbulent for the past how many years for anyone. So just thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to the HOMESCREEN team, which is Maya, Martha, David, Jason, and Larkin, for just like you all mentioned it a couple minutes ago. Thinking of it too, just how did we do this during a time such as this? And I have to say, personally, for me, it's been so healing. So to just listen to you all affirm the work that anyone that identifies as a creator to be here and be present, just really thank you. And so before we kind of do some last minute things, does anyone have any events or maybe opportunities that they'd like to shout out? Put them in the chat too. You all can do that too. But anyone here, any of our
I'll do
Erin, Marley, Tally, Julian, any last minute things?
Like, what am I doing with
I know, right? What are we?
what am I doing with my life past this moment?
But I will say that I am embarking on personal coaching. It's part of my program anyway to do it at the end, but I am offering it out. It's not movement based, they're conversations. I'm billing them as creative consultations. But they're just hour-long chats. Yeah. So if anyone wants to chat with me for an hour, come on down.
I'd love anyone to submit any films to Nowness. If you go through the website, there's a contact us page, and just put my name, address it to me, and it will come straight to me.
Coming at you, Marley. Say no more.
Something I'm focusing on is specifically dance training, like my classical training, especially since that's something that I can do for myself. So it's kind of going to be like a social experiment of like how much I can push myself outside of a dance teacher like screaming at me, which was my upbringing, was, you know, like standing in dance class and always being stressed out. So figuring out how I can work hard but not be stressed out all of the time. So that's going to be a personal just exploration project of like self-driven training and what that looks like for me, and specifically with ballet and hip hop, which are two opposites, and trying to just bridge that gap. So
not anything coming to mind. I'm like I said, working on this show. If you have access to NBC, you want to watch a musical on television that's pretty fun and funny, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. We'll be filming here. We're halfway through it, so we'll be working until March, and then I don't know, which is also exciting. Who knows what's going to happen? The life of a freelancer.
Bring it all on.
Yes. Jazz, is this an okay moment just to say congratulations to all the people that submitted films? They were just, I feel like we didn't get to say that. I really so much enjoyed watching all of them and was so inspired by what everybody made. So regardless of awards, like everyone, good on you, because you really did such a good job. So yeah.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Let's do a little.
You guys also ask it. It's a real privilege for me to be a part of this conversation, and to have to watch things. It was a real gift to just have to sit and intently take things in, and then on top of that, for it to be such beautiful work that I was looking at. And like I said before we joined the live, I watched them all again yesterday, just as a viewer without the judge hat, and it just a real treat. So thank you.
And to remind everyone, there's over 280 films submitted. So for you who is watching and listening, regardless if you're here or not, thank you for submitting. Your work and art matters, and I think it touches a lot on what was said. I was taking notes, and just some key things I'm taking away, and I hope you all take away if you're watching, is like this shift in our world is an opportunity to learn, listen, collaborate, and heal. It's important to think thoughtfully and intentionally, and easier said than done. Be authentic to yourself and your creativity, and something that I know I need to work on, but something I loved hearing from you all is to create work that you like, and know it's okay to create it in your own way, in your own time. So throw it in the chat. What's something you are going to take away from today? Give them some hearts, give them some ones, and just thank you again for being here, and really the wisdom that was shared in this space. I know it's so important, especially during these times, to share our stories. And I hope everyone continues to exchange ideas after HOMESCREEN, because it's up to us to continue the conversation. So, I know we are going to be releasing our second half in about 2 minutes. So come back, y'all. I'm going to put the website again where you can join us back. It's also going to be all of our social media. Look at also our page so you can continue following the stories of Erin, Jillian, Tally, and Marley. Let's go, fam! Like we started today, I'm going to play some music and we can just dance out and just enjoy each other in the space. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much on behalf of Project Home and the HOMESCREEN team. We love you, we thank you, and we look forward to see you. Keep creating.
Yay!
Lately,
I cry.
Let's try something with another. Any song suggestions? Ooh, I like this. Just threw out here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's go second half. I'm gonna put it in the chat because we keep getting some love as well.
Things will get worse.